So another one of the dragon skills I've noticed people having quite a hard time visualizing the value of is dragon weakness. I often hear this being talked about when it comes to weakness players, and a lot of people just dismiss it as terrible, and it seems to have been given quite a reputation of that. So I thought I'd do some maths to try and put some sort of value on what you'll be getting from that health reduction throughout a fight. So in these tests, I'm going to assume the skill is at rank 9, which will be 15% health reduction. It's just the easiest way to compare all the different skills, since that will be the ceiling of them all, rather than comparing one at level 8 to another at level 9 or something like that, just because that is unfair testing. So weakness is in quite a unique position in that it can use both the weakness skills and the commander damage skills with follow-up and strong assault. This is the only build that can actually do that, since bleed silences all commander actives and also excites all troops, which means they can't use weakness attacks. And of course, full female builds will not have Jamie or the healer to be doing weakness attacks unless you hybrid it in with weakness, and then it's basically a weakness build anyway. But because of that, it puts weakness in quite a unique position in that it just has more options. Because if you look at my dragon, for example, you have the 3, which are pretty much mandatory if you're rally leaders, at least, with rally size, reroute, and reinforcement. But then you have these last 4 spots. Tear is going to be the next best, and then the duo of assist and follow-up. I'd order them as assist and then follow-up. You'll want follow-up over any of the other ones in that 6th spot, just because it will give you decent damage, but the synergy with assist is just so good when you pair it with tear to just keep funneling procs into assist as much as possible. But then this 7th spot, potentially, if you have the extra spot on your dragon, of course that will be 6, which is the default maximum amount of slots for dragons, at least when they're at level 60. But you can unlock the extra slot through the Dragon Blessing system. Here I have Strong Assault, but this was because I bought this when I was built as full female, so you can sort of see from the ordering of this, right? I have these top 3 and then follow up and then Strong Assault. I'm pretty sure that's how I bought them. It might have been Assault and then follow up, just because follow up wasn't in the game at the time of me buying this. But this 7th spot is a bit debatable for players that run weakness, and I've very rarely seen this skill actually recommended to people, and there are good alternatives, of course. So there's Strong Assault, but then there is even just troop attack, troop health. A lot of people like the casualty rate hitting stuff for stuff like GB or CCS or KVK. Something like Legion healing can get a lot of value if you can get it to proc, if you're doing very high loss attacking, stuff like soloing buildings and AC and whatnot. So that there are definitely options, particularly when you start bringing in situational factors like that. So if we look at this skill, I ran a test with it, and honestly only one test was hugely necessary, because you can then do maths and figure out situations past that point. So I ran a mono-inf weakness setup with no lats weapon, and there's no other healers, no other lines, so it's only the infantry weakness attacking. The 10 weakness attacks to proc it is similar in tear in that, where it goes off guaranteed this time with this skill, every single 10 weakness attacks. So here, even with just one line, it procs at 17 seconds there, 19 seconds there, 22 there, 24, 28, 30, 33, 36, 38. The thing with it is it does have a cap reduction up to 60%, so only 4 of these actually need to be applied for it to reach its maximum value, assuming it's at level 9 at least. The issue with this is that if you break through the line, so say here, infantry launched a weakness attack against A1 lineup, when that lineup dies, you'll then have to restack that debuff from 0 again. And because of that, that is why this skill is fairly weird in its design, in my opinion, because it's effectively anti-synergistic with the weakness build. Because the way weakness attacking works, this is why something like Kevin is such a good counter to it as well. It will just keep pummeling a lineup until it dies, and then it will move on to another lineup, and then another, and then another. It won't spread its damage at all. It will focus in all its damage onto one single lineup until that dies. And this is where the skill loses a lot of its value realistically, just because of the nature of weakness attacking. If the buff was just a flat buff which hit every lineup, it would be absolutely incredible in value. But it's not that simple, of course. You have to account for the uptime you're actually hitting into these debuffs to actually figure out how valuable it actually is. So you see here, I hit A1 lineup, A1 lineup, A1 lineup, A1 lineup, but then it dies. So I have to hit A2 lineup, A2, 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 and then the fight ends. So I effectively hit into 2 lineups throughout this entire fight. That is, however, incredibly situational. Like, that's why it's very hard to put a number on this, because if you fight into someone running triple weakness, for example, and it's very balanced troops, you'll have more lineup breaks. You'll kill A1, A2, A3, A4, A5, and then you'll go to B1, B2, and so on. The weaker a player you're fighting into, in proportion to you at least, the more times you'll break through their front line, or through their lineups generally on their front line. But in the state of the game where most people are running monotype formations, you can, through that, extend the value of this for a decent amount of time. And at the bottom here, I've done some maths trying to figure out exactly how much health reduction you'll get on average as just a number to visualize, in most scenarios at least. This maths here is the uptime maths. So you see the first one procs at 17 seconds. Fights in GoTWiC last 40 seconds, so there's 23 seconds left in the fight. And you divide that by 40, and that gives you the uptime of the debuff, effectively. And only the first 4 will be relevant in this initial test. So the maximum value will be somewhere around 30 to 35%, I'd say. You can, of course, reduce the initial stacking time through having the healer's weapons, so they heal 3 seconds earlier, or Hector healing Salma or something like that. Having multiple healers as well. Multiple healers especially will cut these seconds to, say, 16, then 17, then it jumps 3 seconds here, so like say 19, and then 20. So you'll gain a bunch of seconds of uptime through having multiple lines stacking this. So let's say somewhere around 35% is the top end number here. But then this is how it actually worked in this fight. I don't know why I said hypothetical scenario here, to be honest. But this is how it actually worked. Because if you look back up here, 28 seconds, the next time it stacks again, is the first hit that stacks this onto this lineup. Realistically, it might have been like a second or 2 earlier than this, but the maths can get so complicated if you go into all the specifics of it. So here, the uptime is of course reduced because you're only hitting with this debuff into that 11-second window from 17 until 28 seconds, and then it refreshes to 0, and then you have to restack it. So when accounting for that uptime, and only hitting into 2 lineups, it would be about 23.6% health reduction. And again, that's only with 1 healer, 1 line of weakness, and without their weapon as well. So you can see here, I list a lot of reasons that can vary this value. And yeah, it's very hard to put an average value on it as a result. But a rough estimation, I'd say, would be somewhere between 15 and realistically like 35% is just a very optimistic best case. 10 might be a better worst case number potentially, but it really will vary depending on who you're fighting into. It's another one which it will have more value the stronger or closer in strength to you player you're fighting into. Because if you're fighting into someone you just smash, it will get barely any value at all, because you'll just keep melting through their lineups and just keep putting the debuff back to 0%. But if we look at something like troop appearances, for example, I think that's probably the best way to visualize this. It's basically just a decent troop appearance at maybe like purple in value, I'd say, like an SS one, because it has 12%. It's a reduction of total attack at 9. 12% total attack reduction, which is very good. And then, what's a decent benchmark for this? Yeah, so somewhere like purple to gold of an SS tier troop appearance is approximately the value you're going to be getting from this. Can be better, can be worse, but the fact that it does better into people of equal strength, I think, is a positive to it. I think that's how you want to look to make account improvements, more so than win more mechanics. Personally, at least, that's how I approach it. And I do think because of this, especially if you're running multi-line weakness, it's probably the best 7th pick in this setup. But for sure, I would not pick it over follow-up. If you only have 6 slots, follow-up will be better than it, because it really isn't great. It's okay, but it does just have that anti-synergy with weakness by the fact that you actually want the debuff to last as long as possible, and weakness totally goes against that.